People without children do not really need money for themselves anyway. Julia's voice rang out crisp and cheerful through the microphone, the kind of tone people use when they think they're being generous instead of cruel. Laughter rippled across the room. 300 guests, all linen suits and silk dresses, champagne flutes catching the light like they belonged here. I stood near the back, fingers tight around a plastic cup of tap water. The cash bar was 10 steps to my left. I didn't move. My dress was old. Not vintage old. Just old, worn thin at the seams, a size that didn't quite fit anymore. I hadn't bought anything new for this baby shower. I hadn't been invited because I mattered. I was here to be seen. Julia smiled wider, scanning the crowd, then let her eyes land on me. On purpose. My mother sat in the front row, pearls at her throat, posture perfect. She nodded along as if Julia had just announced the weather. Not once did she look back at me. That was the part that burned. People expected tears. Or at least a dramatic exit. I gave them neither. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I didn't even flinch. I reached into my purse, took out my phone, and checked the time. 1:58 p.m. I took a slow sip of water. 2 minutes. No one noticed. Not Julia basking in applause. Not the guests whispering behind manicured hands. Not my mother, who had already decided which daughter was worth defending. Because they thought this was the moment they'd won. What they didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that ownership of this party was about to change hands. Julia had no idea she was standing in a cage she'd built herself. Before I tell you what happens when the clock strikes 2, pause for a second. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Because what happened next didn't just humiliate one person, it exposed everyone in that room. And the countdown had already started. 3 weeks earlier. My life at that point was small, but it was mine, a studio apartment with one window that faced a brick wall. Instant noodles stacked neatly in the cabinet. Not because I liked them, but because discipline mattered more than convenience. I was an operations manager by trade. I spent my days identifying risks, closing gaps, making sure systems didn't fail. Order made me feel safe. Every dollar I earned had a job that I called it the Freedom Fund, $22,000. Saved over 5 years. Every bonus, every overtime shift, every tax refund, tracked in a spreadsheet I updated religiously on Sunday nights. The goal was simple. A down payment on a condo. No more rent increases. No more landlords. An exit from the rental trap. I was proud of that number. Meant I was close. It meant I was almost freed at 11:42 p.m. My phone rang, Julia's name lit up the screen, and my stomach dropped before I even answered. Late-night calls in my family only ever meant one thing. Disaster. She wasn't asking. She was screaming. The baby. Oh God, the baby. The words came out in gasps. Medical words followed. Fast, frantic, terrifying. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome. A defect so severe my niece might not survive the night. Emergency in utero intervention. A specialist flown in. Time running out. There was no pause. No room to think. She FaceTimed me. Not just a voice, images. Beige hospital walls. Fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly. Julia's eyes were red and swollen. Mascara streaked like she'd been crying for hours. She tilted the phone to show an ultrasound on a tablet. Timestamps from 20 minutes earlier. Then documents. Official looking. Letterhead. Medical jargon dense enough to feel real. I know you, she said suddenly, lowering her voice. You're smart. You work in operations. You don't fall for things. That's why I'm calling you. That line mattered. Disarmed me. It told me she respected my intelligence, which made trusting her feel rational instead of reckless. She wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for her child. She won't make it through the night without this, Julia whispered. Insurance is stuck on pre-authorization. The specialist needs a deposit now. $22,000. The number hit me like a punch. Exactly $22,000, my entire freedom fund. You're the only one who can do this, she said. Everyone else tapped out. Please. You're the only one. Isolation. Urgency. Heroism. Every lever pulled perfectly. I remember thinking, I can say no to her. I've said no to her before. But I could never say no to a dying baby. My hands shook as I typed in the routing number. The balance stared back at me as it dropped to 0. 5 years erased with one click. I hit send. Julia covered her mouth with her hand and started crying again. Soft this time. You just saved her life, she whispered. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time afterward, staring at cold noodles on the counter. The apartment suddenly too quiet. My chest felt heavy, like something had settled there permanently. But under the weight, there was pride. Money is just paper, I told myself. Family is forever. I went to sleep believing I'd done something heroic. What I didn't know, what makes this hurt in a way that still surprises me, was that the hospital waiting room I saw that night was actually the lobby of a 24-hour spa. That the specialist fee was the deposit for the ice sculpture standing 10 feet from me at that baby shower. And that the countdown I was watching on my phone 3 weeks later was not about revenge, it was about receipts. The first 48 hours were a special kind of torture. Slept in fragments, 30 minutes here, an hour there, jerking awake every time my phone buzzed or didn't buzz. I checked the screen so often my thumb ached. No updates, no surgery confirmation, no relief. I told myself the lies people tell when they're desperate. No news is good news. Hospitals are busy. Julia was probably exhausted. Probably sleeping in a chair beside a NICU. Her texts went unanswered. By the second night, the silence felt louder than screaming. I was curled up on the couch, scrolling mindlessly, not looking for anything, just trying to quiet my head, when the algorithm betrayed me. It wasn't Julia's profile. She'd blocked me from her stories years ago. It was a mutual friend from high school. Someone who still followed her. A pink highlighted circle pulsed at the top of my feed. I tapped it. The video opened to sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling glass walls. Not a hospital room. Ballroom. Manicured gardens stretched beyond the windows like something out of a wedding brochure. Champagne glasses clinked. People laughed. The caption read, "Venue secured. Baby shower of the century coming soon." My ears started ringing. Then I heard her voice. The same voice that had sobbed into my phone 48 hours earlier. Now bright, sharp, drunk on power. "Look at these ice sculptures," she said, panning the camera to a massive frozen swan. "Can you believe we actually pulled this off? Thank God for silent sponsors who are too stupid to ask questions." The camera flipped. Julia stood there in a white silk dress. Not a hospital gown. A flute of sparkling cider in her hand. Healthy, beaming, triumphant. Posted 2 hours ago. My thumb froze on the screen, holding the video in place while the words replayed in my head. Silent sponsors. Too stupid to ask questions. The math hit me like a physical blow. The specialist fee. The glass walls. The imported flowers. The ice swan. There had never been a sick baby. The grief didn't fade slowly. It evaporated, instant, violent, replaced by something cold and heavy that settled in my chest. Felt like a death. Not the one I'd been terrified of, but the death of my sister as I thought I knew her. She hadn't just stolen my money. She'd stolen my empathy, the best part of me. She'd taken unconditional love and turned it into party decor. I didn't scream. I didn't call my mother. I already knew what she'd say. A misunderstanding, or worse. Julia deserved a nice party. I stood up, took a deep breath, walked to my desk and opened my laptop. I wasn't a sister anymore, I was an operations manager. The first call was to the number on the invoice. I lowered my voice, professional, calm. "I'm calling to settle a post-operative balance for a fetal surgery," I said. I could hear a keyboard clicking on the other end. "I'm sorry," the woman replied, confused. "We don't have a patient by that name. And we don't perform fetal surgeries." I pause. "This is the Pure Skin Cosmetic Dermatology Center. Fraud. Confirmed." The invoice had been photoshopped. A spa bill dressed up in medical language. The next morning I went to the venue in person. The glass pavilion was even more imposing, a towering structure of steel and light that screamed exclusion. Inside the management office I met Julian, the owner. He had the tired eyes of a man used to wealthy clients who thought deadlines were optional. He reviewed the file, rubbed his temples, and then looked up at me with a mix of relief and anger when I introduced myself. "Thank God someone showed up," he said. The final balance hadn't cleared. Caterers were threatening to walk. If the remaining $15,000 wasn't paid by noon, he was pulling the plug. The initial deposit, my $22,000, had covered the ice sculptures and the space reservation. Nothing else. Julia was already 48 hours in default. She'd blown everything on the spectacle, gambling she could charm, bully, or disappear before the bill came due. As I walked back to my car, the plan formed with a clarity that surprised me. Julia thought she'd built a cage around me. What she didn't realize was that she'd left the door wide open. And I had the keys. Julian leaned back in his chair, pen tapping against the contract. Waited. Silence makes people reveal things. "If the contract is void," I said carefully, "then the date is technically open." "Correct." He frowned. "Technically, yes. But we're 24 hours out. I can't rebook something like this." "You don't have to rebook it," I said. "I want to book it right now. I'll pay the full $15,000. Up front." The pen stopped tapping. Julian studied me properly for the first time, clearly deciding whether I was another emotional relative or an actual solution. "You want to pay her bill?" "No," I said. "I want to sign a new contract. My name only." That landed. That I laid out the terms without rushing. Exclusive sponsor status. Ownership of catering. Ownership of the time slot. And most importantly, ownership of security instructions. His eyebrows lifted at that. Just slightly. That I pulled out the emergency credit card. The one I'd kept for catastrophic life events. Destroying my sister's ego counted as a catastrophe. The card ran. Cleared. A fresh master service agreement slid out of the printer, warm at the edges. I signed my name, Gabby Anderson, at the bottom. When I walked out, the ink was still wet. The folder pressed against my chest, heavier than a stack of papers. It felt like a weapon. Julia thought she was queen of the castle. What she forgot was the rent. And the landlord had just arrived. Back in the present, it was 5 minutes past 2. The glass pavilion was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Amplify everything. Laughter sounded richer. Champagne sparkled brighter. Arrogance hung thick enough to wade through. I stood near a marble pillar and watched my investment at work. It was a beautiful party. I had to admit that. $22,000 bought excellent lighting. Julia floated through the room like royalty, one hand resting protectively on her bump, accepting compliments from women wearing diamonds the size of grapes. These were her people, her mother-in-law's high society friends, the crowd she'd been desperate to impress her entire life. My mother, Stacy, moved among them like a royal announcer. "Oh yes, Julia has exquisite taste," she told a woman in a Chanel suit. "It's just an 8-figure affair, you know." Exquisite taste. Bought with stolen money. Then Stacy saw me. Her smile faltered. Just a flicker, before she marched over, not bothering to lower her voice. She thrust a stack of used cocktail napkins into my hands. "Could you be useful for once?" she said. "Clear this table. We need it for photos." She treated me worse than hired help. At least she would have tipped them. That I took the napkins without argument. Gave her a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Of course, Mom. Whatever helps the aesthetic." I set the napkins on a tray, reached into my pocket, and pulled out my phone. The contact was labeled Head of Security. Marcus stood near the DJ booth. Big man, black suit, bored expression. He worked for the venue. Which meant he worked for me. I typed 3 words. Initiate protocol B. Marcus glanced down at his wrist, then looked up. Our eyes met across the room. He gave the smallest possible nod. The music kept playing. Guests kept laughing. And Julia had no idea that the party she thought she owned had just changed hands. Again. Julia noticed me again when the photographer started arranging a group shot with her in-laws. I was still in the corner. Still quiet. Still watching. Her smile tightened. I could see it from across the room. The irritation that someone imperfect was in her frame. She leaned toward the photographer, then snapped her fingers. Actually snapped. Sharp, impatient. "Excuse me," she said, voice cutting cleanly through the chatter. "You there?" She pointed at the security guard. "Please escort my sister out. She's killing the mood, and we need this shot to be perfect." The room went silent. Not awkward silent. This is happening silent. People turned. Phones paused mid-air. Julia straightened her posture, already posing for the camera, already smirking. This was her ultimate power move, not asking me to leave but having me removed. A performance for her new family. Proof that she could discard anyone. The guard stepped forward and walked right past me. He didn't slow, didn't glance at me. He went straight to Julia, stopped 3 feet away, crossed his arms, and looked past her toward the DJ booth. He tapped his earpiece twice. The music cut, hard. Laughter died with it. Hundreds of heads turned as one. The guard didn't look at Julia at all. He was watching me. I set my glass down and stepped into the open floor. The microphone screeched as Julia grabbed it, laughing too loudly. "Oh, technical issue," she said. "Sorry everyone. We've got an intruder who doesn't know when to leave." I kept walking. The crowd parted without anyone saying a word. Marcus appeared between us. Calm, immovable. He handed Julia a clipboard. "I'm the client," she snapped. "Remove her." "No," Marcus said evenly. "You're not." He turned the clipboard so she could see. The master service agreement. Exclusive sponsor. Client. Gabby Anderson. Julia's name voided, crossed out cleanly. My signature at the bottom. The color drained from her face. I leaned in close enough that only she could hear me. "This venue. This party. Even the air you're breathing right now. It belongs to me." Pause. "Just like the $22,000 you stole with that fake surgery." Her eyes flicked to her husband. To her mother-in-law. If she screamed, she'd have to explain everything. "You have 60 seconds, I said softly. Option 1. You fake a medical emergency and leave quietly. Option 2. I show the police report and security walks you out in cuffs." Her pride cracked. She gasped, clutched her stomach, screamed about the baby. Chaos erupted on cue. Chairs scraping, people shouting. Her husband rushed forward, lifting her into his arms as guests scattered. Marcus cleared the room with brisk efficiency. Minutes later, the pavilion was empty. I stood alone among melting ice sculptures and wilting orchids. The swan sagged, water pooling at its base. Every dollar spent had been worth this silence. My mother stormed toward me. Fury blazing, I handed her the printout from the clinic. "The invoice was fake," I said. "She wasn't sick. She stole the money. And you helped her spend it." I didn't wait for her answer. I walked out. The next morning I sold Julia's outstanding venue debt to a collections agency. In our state, marital debt is shared. 3 weeks later. Her husband's credit was wrecked. He investigated, found the fraud, filed for divorce, filed for custody. The marriage collapsed faster than the party ever had. The venue refunded part of the money. I used it for a down payment. The condo was empty when I moved in. No couch, no orchestra. Just clean floors, quiet rooms, and peace. If you've ever had to look like the villain just to survive, drop a fire in the comments.